So nothing's changed as far as press conferences, although he smiles a little bit more. Brian, you think Lynch will have a real impact as the Seahawks attempt to make a Super Bowl run?
Well, I don't know that he's going to have the impact that he once had as far as his ability on the field. But the biggest thing that he's going to bring back to this locker room is attitude. And that's what this thing in Seattle was built on. You remember the Legion of Boom. You remember what happened with the offense, just trying to play bully ball and run through people. That was started by Marshawn Lynch because he brought the attitude. He brought that passion. And so he brings that back to an offense that really with Chris Carson, you had that same type of thing. A running back that was willing to run through a wall for this football team, a running game that defenses had to respect, third best in the league. And the other part to that I love is that when you have that type of running game, it allows Russell Wilson to do the things that he does best. Play fakes and then throw the ball deep. That allows Lockett to get involved in the game. That allows Metcalf to get involved in the game. And Marshawn brings that to this table. The other thing it brings is pass blocking ability. Rashad Penny, who got hurt a couple weeks ago, he just wasn't very good in pass blocking. Marshawn Lynch is very good at pass protection. And the last time they played the 49ers, like they'll play this week, the 49ers had 5 sacks. So he will help protect the quarterback. I think he brings all those things. The biggest question is impact on the field. Will he be game ready? It's just hard to tell. Right. It's hard to think that you've been off for a complete season and you're coming back and you're ready to play a football game. But he's going to bring that passion, that attitude, and maybe that's the edge that the Seahawks need.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to help in the locker room. As you said, the attitude. Also, he's a connection to the glory years, where the Super Bowl and all that. So I think all that's great. And also, if you look at his last 2 years in Oakland, where they weren't typical Marshawn Lynch years, however, he averaged 4.2 yards a carry. That's right around his career average of 4.3 and better than some of his years when he averaged below 4 yards a carry. So that would tell you that, you know, a lot of guys, when they retire as running backs, you can see it in their yards per carry just dropping drastically. That's not the case with him. Maybe the rest did his body good. He's only 33, which I know that's old for a running back. But, you know, some guys are playing a little longer. We saw C.J. Anderson. I know it wasn't the same situation he had been with Carolina, but he had been cut. He goes to the Rams and plays well. And as you said, their offensive line, obviously they give up a lot of sacks. But they can run block. You know, Chris Carson and Rashad Penny had great success. So I think there'll be holes for Lynch to run through. So I'm going to say he'll have a pretty decent impact on that team.
Here's where I think Marshawn Lynch is going to have the biggest impact, because I don't think he's going to be great. And I love Marshawn. I think he's one of the most interesting people in sports. And the dichotomy between how he feels talking to the media and how he feels talking to people he's comfortable with, I think is really fascinating. And I think he's
never been a beat writer.
Well, no, I get that part of it. I've never been the one having to ask him the questions. But the reason I think it's going to be good for Seattle potentially is I think it's going to force them out of this archaic offense they've been running the last few years, which is use Russell Wilson in case of emergency instead of use Russell Wilson like he's Russell bleeping Wilson. Last year, they lost the playoff game to the Cowboys because they were so insistent on staying committed to the run, even though every time Russell Wilson dropped back, they got around 9 yards per play, and every time they ran the football, they got around 3 or fewer yards per play. The Seahawks have overachieved to their talent this year. Now, I was higher on them than most. I had them winning the division going into this season. But if you look at their point differential compared to their win-loss record, they do not line up. They have a gaudy win-loss record despite not having blown out anyone this year except for the one game against the Cardinals, and they went and promptly lost to the Cardinals second time around. They are escaping through great Russell Wilson plays at the end of games, other teams making mistakes at the end of games. The only way that they're going to be able to go on a real playoff run is if they are forced into, because Pete Carroll doesn't want to do it, the coordinator up there doesn't want to do it, as far as, you know what, Russell, you're one of the 3 best people in the entire world at what you do. Drop back 40 times and make magic happen. Now, you might say that's not Seattle Seahawks football. Correct. But if they are going to beat more talented teams, it's going to be not because Marshawn Lynch all of a sudden, to me, looks like 2014. It's going to be because you don't have Chris Carson, you don't have Rashad Penny, you don't have C.J. Procise, and you have no choice but to say, you know what, Russell, make magic happen. That, to me, is the bigger story here, that we wouldn't be talking about Seattle adding a running back if it was anyone other than this guy right here, because you're adding a replacement-level player at this point in the season. Now, maybe he'll be brilliant, and that'd be a cool story as well. But I think the story of this is, does it make them use their best player the way they should have been using their best player the last couple of years?
They had the option of doing that all season long, but their run game had been that good because their offensive line had blocked well enough. I think, and so I do agree with you. They're going to have to score some points here. They're going to have to put up 24, 27 points a game. Russell Wilson certainly has the ability to do that. But I also believe that Marshawn gives you that 3rd and 1, hand the ball off to 24. Let him go ahead and get those yards. He gives you those attitude plays, which make a difference in the game. It makes a difference on the sideline and in the locker room. They also know that a guy, and to your point, he's a throwback to the past. He's a guy that has been there and done that, has been a Super Bowl champion. He certainly would have been another Super Bowl champion if they would have handed him the football. And so when I look at Marshawn, it's much more than just what Russell Wilson is going to do. It's about the attitude, the collective attitude for the team.
But do you think they're going to go further because of Marshawn Lynch? Does anyone here think the Seattle Seahawks are a better team this year because of adding him?
I don't think so. I don't think they're a better team. I think Chris Carson probably fit their offense
a little
the
bit
best.
Better.
But, I mean, you don't know what you're going to get from Marshawn. The good thing for Marshawn Lynch is that he wasn't built, as far as his career-wise, especially on speed. It wasn't, because as you get older, you lose your speed. He was built on running people over, toughness, aggressive running, and that's something, that's an attitude. Right. That's something that could come back with you no matter what age you are. If his speed comes back just a little bit in the next couple of weeks, that gives this Seattle offense an advantage.
And the pass blocking point you two made is a really, really important one, that they actually might have an upgrade there as opposed to even if it's a downgrade in the actual rushing.
All right, Brian, it's actually amazing that this team has gotten as far as it has without anyone for Carson Wentz to really throw the ball to. How have they done it? How are they in this position now?
I think you got to start with Doug Peterson, and I've been pretty hard on Doug throughout the season because I thought his team at points was underachieving. But at this point, when you have all the injuries that they have, especially on the offensive side of the ball, it takes someone strong at the helm to keep that team together. And I think Doug has done a great job of saying, hey, we lost one guy, somebody else has to step up. We lost another guy, somebody else has to step up. And not only step up, we have to play better despite that guy being gone. Doug Peterson has galvanized his football team with his leadership ability. He's been called a player's coach, but at this point, the players are responding to him. I think the second part is Carson Wentz has just played better in the last 2 games. And so when you look at the game against the Cowboys, he played 4 quarters of excellent football. The 2 games before that, Washington and the Giants, he played 2 quarters, but it was the second half of both of those games of excellent football. You have to have a quarterback, like Coach Mangini always says, as an elevator, a guy that can be a force multiplier, and that's what Carson Wentz has been. He made those guys who are subpar, free agent type of guys look much better than they actually are, and that's why you pay the guy. That's why you pay Carson Wentz to be one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, because he can make everybody else better. That's what happened to this football team.
And to be fair, how are the Carson Wentz and the Eagles on the verge of clinching the NFC East despite all the injuries? That's what it says on the screen. Because they're in the NFC East.
Right.
And another team with very high expectations, at least by some, going into the year that has had their very fair share of injuries is the Rams. The Rams responded to those injuries by their quarterback regressing a bit, turning the ball over too much, and them struggling throughout the year all the way to 8-7 and eliminated. The Eagles have had their quarterback regress a bit, turn the ball over a little bit too much, all the injuries, all the way to 8-7, and win and you're in. So a lot of it is circumstantial, but where I will give Carson Wentz the most credit is exactly what you talked about at the end there. 4th quarter against the Giants, shouldn't have been in that position, but you were. And he was exceptional. 4th quarter against Washington. The offense played well enough in that game. That was not about the offense not holding up its end of the bargain. Similar to the Miami game, by the way, when the offense played well enough and the defense fell apart. Carson Wentz was exceptional. And the entire game against the Cowboys, I know they didn't score a whole bunch of points, but that was the best game he's played all year. The highest completion percentage, most yards per attempt, 2nd most passing yards. One of his 4 games this year with a passer rating above 100. He was great in that game as you saw guys falling by the wayside. Now he's going to have to do it again against the Giants, potentially without Zach Ertz. And you can if Zach Ertz can go, how much will the rib injury hamper him?
I've broken my ribs. I've broken my cartilage. And from the running back perspective, I couldn't go. I couldn't put myself in a position every single play. And I think Zach Ertz, similarly, will be put in the same situation. Catching the football and being tackled by guys that are a little bit smaller than you still is damaging to the ribs. Just remember, when you have a rib injury, you can't laugh, you can't cough, you can't sleep very well. All those things affect your ability to go out there and prepare yourself throughout the week and play on Sunday. It's going to be hard for Zach to be helpful in this football game.
I want to know I want you to respond to this. I think one of the reasons Carson, and I want to give him credit because you're right, he's carried guys who are, end of the bench type players, third and fourth stringers. But I think part of that is that a lot of the guys who are hurt were veterans. We know there are reports out about the locker room being divided about Carson and that he's not, the leader we need and so on and so forth. And a lot of those guys had more favorable experiences with Nick Foles. Mm-hmm. And so I think that they're out, they're injured. These guys coming in, they're not thinking any of that. They're thinking, I want to show either the Eagles or some other team in the NFL that I can play, that I belong in this league, that I can actually play in this league. So I think that has helped Carson be a better leader, that these guys, I think, are all ears. Is there some truth to that, do you think?
I think there's a bunch of truth to it. And I said it a couple of weeks, and I kind of compared it to the Russell Wilson situation that happened in Seattle a few years back. It was a Legion of Boom. It was Marshawn Lynch. They were the leaders of that football team. And Russell Wilson just naturally kind of played the backup role. But as Pete Carroll got rid of those guys, now Russell Wilson got elevated to the leader of that football team, and that team has taken off just a bit. Same thing with Carson Wentz. Of course, Alshon being there, a veteran. Nelson Aguilar, not as an established player, but he's been there a little bit longer than Carson. Those guys were just kind of out on their own. They're veterans. They're doing their own thing. They didn't look at Carson as the leader of this football team. Really, in most aspects, he was a golden child, given a whole bunch, but hasn't produced very much. But Carson Wentz, over the last couple of weeks, with these younger guys that look up to him as a leader, has become much more productive. And I think a lot of the guys on the team are now saying he is the leader of this football team. Lastly, I think when you talk about why has this team persevered through some of these injuries, Miles Sanders, the running back out of Penn State. Over the last couple of weeks, he's had 3 of the last 4 games over 22 touches per game. He's just been one of the most explosive weapons in the NFL these last couple of weeks. That running game and his ability in the screen game has helped this football team be much better.
And even with the injuries, I think Philadelphia is going to be able to move the football because the Giants, guys are running wide open on the Giants all year long. The Giants defense, we talk about Daniel Jones and his fumbles and the quarterback situation there, Saquon dealing with the injury and then having the monster game last week. The Giants defense is the biggest reason that they have been a terrible team throughout the year. Even in their win this past week against Washington, you did let Washington score 35 on you despite playing multiple quarterbacks. And Haskins was playing one of the best games of his very young career until he got hurt. So the question to me is, if the Eagles lose, if you're right, if they lose, I don't think it's going to be because the offense is held down. I think it's going to be because this Eagles defense, once again, on the road, no-shows. The Eagles defense has been one team at home, one team on the road. They're allowing fewer than 17 points a game at home. They're allowing 28 points per game on the road. The Cowboys game in Dallas. Dallas hangs 37 on them. The Cowboys game in Philly. Dallas doesn't score a touchdown. I understand it's different times of the season. Can this Giants defense, against a quarterback that's coming off the best game of his career in Daniel Jones, can this Eagles defense step up just a bit? To me, that's the way the Eagles lose if they lose, is that the defense, all of a sudden, you have New York Giants running wide open throughout the game. I don't think it's going to be because, even without Zach Ertz, you can't move the football, because everyone can move the football in the New York Giants.
You guys have a lot of confidence in that Eagles offense, a lot of confidence. There's nobody that I even know or recognize on that team, right? Especially if Zach Ertz doesn't play. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.